بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد بن عبد الله وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم اجعل اجتماعنا اجتماعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا معنا شقيا ولا محروما. I would like to welcome everyone in this very unique session, unique in so many ways in the title, where we are walking the walk together, creating a collaboration plan between the parents and teachers to model the way, and unique in a way that is delivered by, mashallah, educators who are couples with impressive resume, mashallah. Sister Sana Muhyiddin is a licensed therapist, and brother Saad Qadri is an English teacher, and both of them, mashallah, have acquired Sharia degree. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in this knowledge, and mashallah, now we're gonna take some time and listen from them and their guidance on how can we walk the walk together. Without any further ado, inshallah, I'm not sure who's starting. Go ahead, inshallah.
Well, the adage is ladies first, right? Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man ala amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I appreciate everyone coming today. Before I begin, is everything clear from my end? The microphone is clear. Everything is clear from my end?
Yes.
Yes, no? Okay, alhamdulillah. I just wanted to make sure that that's the case. I also recognize there's a motorcycle driving by that might be causing some problems, but inshallah, we'll move forward from there. So alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, we have the opportunity today to come together, really following an excellent presentation by Dr. Padella just a few moments ago, where I had actually sent in a message in the chat box that really there's no reason for us to present, because alhamdulillah, she covers so much within her presentation that related to what we are going to discuss today. But it also makes it easier for me because a lot of the foundational conversations took place earlier, and we may be able to move past it with a little more ease. So today, alhamdulillah, my wife, Sheikha Sana Muhyiddin, who is a therapist by profession, she's a scholar of the deen, and she actually worked in Islamic schools and works, I think you worked at MCC Academy, right? Was there another school that you had worked at as a therapist as well?
No, it's just MCC.
Yeah, well, just MCC. It's not that place, you know. So, but so she brings the unique perspective of being a parent of a student at an Islamic school, or students at an Islamic school, of being a community member of an Islamic school, of being someone who used to work at an Islamic school as a school counselor, and also as being a scholar, and I bring my perspective as well. So today we begin, and we have 4 points we want to cover together. We want to speak about why we send our children to Islamic schools, or why even have Islamic schools. We also will get into how teachers and parents can work together. We're going to speak about this idea of modeling and why it's absolutely integral and essential within all areas of student life. And finally, how we can model as a team. And by a team, I mean from the school and from the home. Because more often than not, we don't see the collaborative efforts take place because of various easily resolved situations. And today, inshallah, as we address them, we'll see that it's not too difficult for us to work in a partnership where it's so collaborative that it can almost become one body. And we have 3 goals. And, you know, one of the things that I like to do as an English teacher is we love to pre-write. And so actually, when my wife and I were sitting down to sort of go over what we're going to cover, we began to pre-write. So I actually have my pre-write right over here. We began to create a journey, like a diagram of where we're going to go. And this is the beginning, and this is the end, and this is all the things we want to cover along the way, which you will see in the form of slides together. And as we're going through this pre-writing or brainstorming session, there are 3 goals that we're able to identify. The first goal is, well, obviously, we want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be on the way of his Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is always going to supersede everything. And it's almost done without being said. But from the goals that we're going to explicitly mention today, the first one is we want to impress upon parents and really staff members as well. But in schools, we often see this presence. So upon parents, the importance of modeling what they want their children to become. The second is we want everyone here, the administration, staff members, faculty, parents, etc., to appreciate the role of the other. And we'll discuss that as we move forward. And finally, we want to provide practical tips, because it's great to function in theory, but when we can see the practicality and the goal, then a person leaves with a to-do list or something that is very easy to put into play. And we saw it in the last session, as Dr. Padella gave us this, I should say Dr. Rizu Padella, I think that would be more appropriate, gave us practical methods by which we were able to move forward. So we want to establish at the end as well. So let's move forward. First question is the common question that I like to ask people when they come to Islamic schools. Why are your children attending Islamic schools? So I'm going to ask my wife, why are our children attending Islamic schools? And just don't say the school discount I get as being because I'm a teacher there. Not a good enough reason.
I mean, I think we have a few reasons that we send our kids to Islamic school. Definitely the environment, right? We want to provide an environment that mirrors or mimics what we have at home, and maybe even reinforces or adds more than we teach at home. And because it's a good education experience for them. So we believe in the school's goals, and we believe in what the school will teach our kids. And we believe that they are good educators and that they will provide a good education for our kids as well.
When we were discussing sending our children to Islamic school, they're coming out of public school as we moved back to the Chicagoland area. We left it up to our kids, but one of the things that our children mentioned, or at least the eldest mentioned, was that he wanted to be around Muslims, which does not mean that he doesn't interact with non-Muslims. They're in Taekwondo, played Little League, and whatever other components of the community that he was able to engage in allowed him to have general exposure. But he wanted to really have his academic setting around Muslims. Now, when we asked this question, I inserted the word Islam and Muslim in here, but this question is actually answered through a variety of articles based upon faith-based schooling. So you could actually replace this with the word Christian or Judaic. It was based upon articles that spoke on faith-based schooling. And they said the majority of parents and families that sent their children to faith-based schooling did so because they wanted a religious environment for their children. Or there was a sense of a religious culture, like a Catholic culture, a Protestant culture that was present, a Judaic culture that was present, and by extension, a Muslim culture that's present that they wanted to preserve. They wanted to have some opportunity for students to study their faith. They also recognized that there were influences in public schools that they did not want their children to be exposed to. And finally, whatever they were teaching at home, they wanted to be fortified within the school system so that there's not a disconnect. Can anyone here identify what is missing? Something is missing here that actually did not make it into those articles. But there's a part here that's just missing. So what's missing here? Anyone? When we're deciding to send a child to a specific school, what's missing? What would you assume would come up right away? Well, I will jump in since everyone's being a little shy today. Oh, I'll ask my wife, what's missing over here?
I have no idea. What are you saying is missing?
So someone said character development, but I think character development sort of comes into this area, sorry, this over here, and this over here. It's going to be education. You don't see people saying, well, I'm sending my child to this school for their standard of education, which is strange. No, very few people say, well, why are you sending your child to this college? Oh, because they don't perform as well as other schools. No one would ever say that. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, over the years, Islamic schools, and I've been in Islamic schools since 2001, we have definitely raised the bar and standard. Now parents are comfortable knowing that their programs at the Islamic school, the education at the Islamic school, the curriculum being utilized at the Islamic school, the pedagogy that is sort of the foundation of the Islamic school is on par or even beyond that of the schools in the surrounding area. We've noticed that our school is quite accelerated. Like my son, if he were to be in public school, there are a few classes he would have to wait till next year to take. But most people are not worried about the academic elements. Okay, the academic element is not what really bothers them. It's that preservation of something internal, spiritual, religious that they really look to hold on to. Now, when a person chooses a school, there's 5 basic elements that are always going to be considered: the teachers, the leadership, the students themselves, understanding the faith, and the parents. And today we want to take all 5 into consideration, but it's that top one and that bottom one uniquely that we're going to draw a connection between. Why? Well, the reason is very simple. More often than not, the student body is going to be affected by the teachers and parents. So if we can resolve what happens in the school and at home, and that modeling takes place, which we'll cover shortly, in a way that's going to be beneficial for the student body, and the student body will naturally change. The management, sometimes their decisions are not going to be as essential to the daily affairs of the students. So it's really going to be the teachers and parents that we're going to be focusing on. Now, my wife and I can both tell you that it's not easy to send a child to Islamic schools. There are a bunch of variables, and there's a bunch of conflicts that may arise, difficulties that may arise, some of which I've mentioned over here, but many of which have not even made this list. So it's not easy to send a child to Islamic school. So we know why we send our children to Islamic school. We know it's not easy to send them to Islamic school, yet we still do so. The cost of education is high. Yes, compared to another private school that ranges in the mid 20,000s, it might be cheaper, it might be less expensive. However, if you compare it to a public school, it's definitely more expensive. Public school, it comes out of our taxes. We have a lot more ease. So despite these difficulties that are present, despite the variables that come into play, we still send our children there. So if we're going to send our children there, despite all of these difficulties, the variables that exist, then we want to maximize in our investments. So how do we do that? And that's where we're going to move forward, inshallah. Now, you want to take it from here?
Sure. So, Bismillah. So one of the first things that we talk about whenever we start a deed, which we know Islamically, is the idea of framing our intention, right? The idea of framing is an important aspect to anything that we do. We want to put a positive spin or a positive frame around whatever it is that we do. So if we talk about the same idea of how many kids from our school, for example, go to college, we could say, 10% of our graduates don't attend a 4-year university, which sounds pretty bad, right? Like if you were to say that to a prospective parent, they might be like, well, I don't really want to send my kid there. But if we were to change the frame of how we say that, and it's the exact same information, but instead say, well, 90% of our graduates do attend a 4-year university, a parent might be more interested in sending their child to that school. And all we've done is just changed how we've framed the idea behind the same concept. So, and also we know, obviously, that Islamically and in our deen, it's important for us to always have intentions behind what we do. And that framing also applies to intention. So if we look at this hadith by the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, actions are but by intentions, and every man shall have only that which he intended. Says he whose migration was for Allah and his messenger, his migration was for Allah and his messenger. And he whose migration was to achieve some worldly benefit or to take some woman in marriage, his migration was for that which he migrated. So, and even behind that is the framing. Like, what was the framing behind their migration? And even that makes a difference. So when we look at sending our kids to Islamic school and getting the maximum benefit from that, how are we framing that? And how are we framing that at home? How are we framing that with our conversations with our kids? And how are we framing that even with our conversations with their teachers? All of this is important.
Now, one of the things about framing that is going to be really important for us now, as my wife just mentioned, is that this word modeling is it's a sort of fancy word, and we're going to define it later. Parents pretty much, not all parents, but many parents will pretty much say, well, this is my child. I used to be imam. I was imam for 4.5 years. And I would notice in like the maktab system, the after school mini madrasa, or the evening school or the weekend school, you have parents that sort of come drop their kids off and just say, well, just fix my child. It's fix my child, take my child, and fix my child. Well, the reality is that whether or not we say that as parents, the school will put an immense amount of effort in trying to mold the child to be the best graduate and best person and best believer as possible. But we see in the framing how different the two attitudes are. One attitude, take my child and fix him or fix her, pretty much means I'm not going to be involved in this at all. You do it. They are involved in it. Because if a child is being taught, for example, in school, not to backbite, and comes home and is surrounded by the people to whom he or she looks up and sees them backbiting, then either they will look down upon the parents, which inshallah will never happen, or look down at the school and basically say, my role models at home are not modeling this, and I don't believe it to be important. Both ways the child is being taught in school, but if there's participation from the parents, they frame this as a collaborative effort, then all of a sudden, what happens is that everyone is part of the picture, and subsequently, we're able to move forward together. And even the hadith that my wife was mentioning, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَةُ لِلَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَةُ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ كَانَ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا. Both places talk about hijrah, the migration. So in both places, the action was done. But what was the frame? The framework of the first, the framing effect of the first was, we did it for the sake of Allah. And the second was for the sake of the world, right? For the dunya, yusibuha, to attain a imra or a woman yankihuha, to marry her. Oh, fi riwayat tazawwajuha, to marry her. You have in both situations, it's the same act. So what we're trying to begin with in this particular slide was this idea of how are we going to frame this effort. Now, parents have always been teachers historically. That's like the common refrain that everyone always says. Oh, the first parent is the mother, and the first murabbiya is the mother, and the first murabbi is the father. We all say it. We all sing the same refrain, but it's not always accepted by everyone. In fact, from a cognitive perspective, both in educational psychology and social psychology, and just in general psychology, we see that children, as you'll see in the next slide, they take parents as teachers. And even from a linguistic perspective, this word walad in the Arabic language refers to a child. However, walad, this idea of walada, it also refers to produce. If you say yulad, that might refer to someone being born. It also means to produce or to cause or bring to an effect or to engender. So by the very linguistic essence of having a child, you and I see through the Arabic language, it doesn't mean just to bring someone to the world. It also means to bring a means of change, to bring a cause of change, and to engender or generate or produce some sort of change or effect in the world. So just by having children, we have now committed to being these types of people, these agents of change. So I'm going to let my wife go forward from here. Do you want me to go to the next slide about children and parents?
Yeah, sure.
Or you want to stay on the slide for me? Okay.
No, yeah, go to the next slide. So thank you. One of the ideas that we were talking about is this idea of learning, and children specifically how they learn. But the first thing I want to say is that, the most recent research that we have about learning, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, is that we are constantly learning. So learning doesn't ever stop, but learning starts, from the moment we're born, and it continues on from there. But everybody goes through different stages of learning. So with children, what they start first to do is to mimic. And actually with mimicking, first they observe. So even infants are looking and watching, and then they learn to mimic you. And so then you see that if you look at an infant and if you smile, they'll eventually smile with you. Or if you stick out your tongue, they'll stick out their tongue with you because they're just mirroring exactly what they see you doing. So that's that first type of learning. And they are learning how to make sense of their limbs and all of these different parts of their body and how to use it by watching you. And then they go forward to being toddlers, and toddlers then also learn by imitating us, right? By watching what we do, everyone around them, and imitating. When our eldest child was little, he didn't start talking. And he was about 18 months and he wasn't talking. And I couldn't figure out why. And my mother, who's a early childhood development. She studied that for when she was younger. She was telling me, you have to talk to him all day long. That's the only way he's going to learn how to talk. So if he's spending the day with you and you're not saying anything, he's not going to learn how to talk. So you have to narrate your day to him. You have to say, okay, now we're going to get up and now we're going to brush our teeth and now we're going to have breakfast. And when I started doing that, he started talking, right? Because he needed to learn how to talk from me. It's not something he was naturally going to learn. And then if we go on and we see how school-age children learn. So school-age children then go on to a more sophisticated way of learning. And we even at that point have to teach them how to learn. You have to learn how to hold your pencil so that you can write, so that you can take notes, so that you can study for a test. It all comes, one thing builds on another. And that's that important age in which we are teaching them how to properly learn. But it's still, even at that point, they're still watching everything we do. And that's why we say things to our kids like, do as I do, not as I say, right? Because we want them, do as I say, not as I do, because we want them to learn from what we're telling them to do, even if we ourselves are not doing it. So for example, we could teach our children, how the dangers of sugar and how bad sugar is for them and how they shouldn't, consume processed foods. But if we ourselves are sneaking in candy or sneaking in snacks, thinking they don't see us, they see it because kids see everything. And that's what they're going to learn. Number one, how to be sneaky. And number two, that mama and baba are telling me one thing and they're doing something else, right? So even at that age, we have to recognize that they're still watching, they're still imitating. And that's a really important concept that we have to keep in mind. And oftentimes, kids that I work with will say things to me like, yeah, mama says one thing and she does another. And they're very quick to call us out, which we all know, right? So we have to keep in mind that they're always watching us. And then you get to the next stage, which is the super fun stage of teenagers, who their developmental task at that age is to rebel, right? Their developmental task is to hear what we're saying and basically do the opposite. Right. And like Miriam was talking about in those years, Dr. Rizvi Padella in the previous talk, where she was talking about, at those years, you become their friend and you advise them, right? Because you've basically at this point taught them everything they need to know and recognize that they're still watching you, and you become their friend and talk to them about it. And then beyond that, after that, when they come out of that stage, then they're young adults and they're learning to synthesize. They're learning to take in what maybe they were rebelling before and change it and actually enact what they've learned from you. And again, what they're seeing from us, from teachers, from parents, from adults in their lives. So that idea of learning is constantly there, and we have to hone it in and take advantage and rein in all of those great tasks and those great skills that they have to the most positive effect for them.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that with adolescents, sometimes parents do complain that, oh, he doesn't listen, she doesn't understand, not doing what I want them to do. The reality is that they are learning. But their cognitive stage right now is basically saying, what they want and what they're doing, just do the opposite. But they are learning. So at no point in our lives, many of us have noticed that children, we always say, oh, you have big shoes to fill. What's the one article of clothing children always wear of ours and we can't find it when we need it? It's shoes. Little toddlers, they want to be like us. And they do these very, sometimes what looks to be eccentric behavior patterns, but really in reality, it's just what we do anyway. I notice even right now, I'm 40 years old. At 40, I'm noticing, oh my God, my dad used to do this when he was younger, but I'm now acting it out. I'm now modeling that behavior because I've spent X amount of my entire life around my father in such a way that I have now taken it in, and it's just about time that it comes forth. And what's interesting in the Latin root of education, educare, you can either take an E-D-U-C-E-R-E or C-A-R-E. If you take it from the root C-A-R-E, it means to bring out that which is within. And so there are things that exist within, and then it brings it forth from you. And so what we see is that when we model, or when we give the opportunity for people to model, there's something inside that is brought forth, but you can help refine and shape that. And this is why a lot of parents outsource education, because a lot of parents, they feel that it's time now for my child to move on to school, and maybe I can't teach the child needs to learn anymore. I'm unable to give proper time. I have other children at home. I have a parent at home who needs my attention. I might be working. There are various reasons why we send our children to school, but we outsource the education. And when we outsource the education, in essence, what we are basically doing is we are saying, I have been this child's sole educator. And now I'm entrusting this mantle of education on so-and-so person. So teachers, if ever you feel like, oh, the parent is completely on, parent has found a pseudo replacement for himself or herself in you and feels you to be worthy of that mantle. Imam Zurnuji, rahmatullahi alayhi, who wrote the famous text, Ta'lim Ta'allim, it's like a primer on how to study. He mentioned that the Salaf and the Khalaf, the Mutaqaddimin, Mutaakhirin, like the early generations and the later generations, when they would search for a teacher, they would actually spend time before studying with that teacher, just observing the character of that teacher. How is this teacher? Imam Malik, rahmatullahi alayhi, we know his mother, she said to him, خذ من حلمك قبل علمك خذ من علمه قبل علمه أو كما قالت. That she said, take from his character, like his forbearance, before you actually take from his knowledge, meaning see how the person is and begin to identify, is this person worthy to be now in the place of my parents? So children are sent to school now to have this next level of education. And really, what do parents want? So I'll ask my wife, and I shouldn't have showed her the slide. I mean, she's seen the slide before, but what do you want from the teachers? I should say that. Yeah.
What do I want from?
Yeah, like what do you expect from teachers? And just pardon the slide for a moment. Okay. If I were to say Zaid's in 9th grade, what do you want from his teachers? What do you expect from them? What would you say?
Well, I expect them to teach him and to treat him with respect, and to embody the Islamic goals that I believe the school upholds.
And the reality is that if we were to take what she said and what a lot of us feel, through research, we're able to find out it comes into a few different categories. We want a safe space for our children. We want them to be treated fairly and equally. We don't want anyone to be given preference or deference one over the other. We want the place where they go to have an environment that helps facilitate learning. And finally, any resources, financial resources, physical resources, any resources should be at my child's fingertips. That's what we want. So my wife eventually wants them to provide an Islamic environment, and that's going to be the fourth one or even the third one. All the things that we want come into this, to these expectations. Now, teachers have expectations of parents. Before I go to the next slide, can any teachers jump in, either on the microphone or in the chat? What do you expect from parents? Let's see. Yeah, a lot of parents do think we're going to recreate their children as Muslim kids. Remember, Ms. Al-Qudsi, we're going to, may Allah preserve you, we're going to go into that, inshallah. We want them to be supportive, good. What else do we want? What else do we expect from they do think, they want us to be good role models. They do think that their duty is done, unfortunately. I shouldn't say they, I'm also a parent of a child who couldn't go to Islamic school. To listen and obey again. Okay, good relationships, awesome. So, teacher expectations. We expect that when children are at home, that the parents provide them a safe space at home. We don't want our children, our students to go home to a place that's going to endanger our students. We expect them to be treated fairly and equally. We don't want them to succumb or to be overwhelmed by trauma because there's this discrimination within the home. We expect them to have an environment at home that will maintain what they learned at school, right? We don't want them to have this disconnect. And finally, any resources, the time of parents, your ability to maybe to give them, maybe utilize an app to help support their learning, or maybe tutoring, etc., to be readily available. If you look at the expectations between parents and teachers, it's pretty much the same. we expect the same thing. I mean, we might word it differently, but the reality is it's the same. It really is a relationship that one benefits from the other, but our expectations are quite the same. And the reason for this is because we, the parents, want the children to be educated and to be safe, etc., and to grow. But teachers, we want our children to be educated and to be safe and to grow. And so our expectations are really mirroring one another. The place in which we want to see it actualized at home. But the reality is that aside from a few small nuances, it's the same. And sometimes this disconnect grows because we don't see that we're really in this together. And so as we move forward, did you want to comment on this, Sarangano, before I move forward?
No, you can go ahead and move forward.
That now in this age of Corona, things have really started changing. And some teachers are loving it. They're laughing, like, oh, this is great. And so I want to humor you because we have a few minutes, we're still on schedule, with a short clip. There were quite a few clips I was able to look at before jumping and choosing this one. This one is because, alhamdulillah, there's no abrasive language, no curse words or anything inappropriate, not like inappropriate, but something that I would not want to necessarily show at an education forum. But there's other really funny ones out there. So everyone humor me for a moment and allow me to show this to all of you. I will share my screen and my sound shortly. Okay. Resume the share over here. I feel like this is like school again. Let me share, come over here. Let me optimize my sound. Okay, so did everyone see the clip? I'm not gonna go through all of it, but everyone sees the clip, right? I'm gonna keep your silence as pretty much saying yes.
People of Earth, I gotta talk about homeschool. Homeschool is crazy. All right, first of all, teachers everywhere, we're sorry. We're sorry. We knew, but we didn't know. Homeschooling is this weird. It's a mix. It's a mix. At one moment you're really proud and there's all this triumph and you're looking at your child like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even know you could do that. The very next minute you're yelling like, what happened? I thought you said you could read. Oh, yes. The answer's 7. Just write down 7. Just write 7. Write 7. Just write 7. The answer is 7. You told me it was 7. Why are you crying? It ain't easy. We've only got 2. One's in first grade. The other one's in preschool, and we're still like, I'm just glad we're still smarter than their work. We're still smarter than their work. So it's not that's not getting the best of us. It's us. We suck at it. And teachers, thank you. Thank you for what you do. You're amazing. You have to be that kind of a person in order to be a teacher. You know what I mean? Not everybody can I couldn't do it. I'd be snapping on them. After the apocalypse is over, I'm joining the parent-teacher association, organization. I'm joining the school board. I'm going to all the school board meetings. I'm running for class president. Every time a teacher jumps up and says, we need a thing, I'm like, yes, vote it. They get it. Give it to them. First of all, they should be getting tips. We're going to start bringing them glasses of wine. Every teacher should get a free butler. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how teachers do it. I don't know how teachers do it with a classroom full. We got 2 kids, and I am sick of them. So teachers, I mean, y'all are gifted people. You're different. We should have like an adopt the teacher program. Teachers should get like free clothing. Teachers should get, I think we got to start giving teachers free cable. Teachers are amazing. Anyway, thank you teachers for what you do.
Okay, so everyone's still with me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
We hear you.
Oh, you hear me? Okay, cool. Because it looked like everything froze for one moment, but alhamdulillah, you hear me. So, and I find it hilarious because I think a lot of parents do share the sentiments that they feel like, man, what is going on? I did not expect it to be like this. So alhamdulillah, they're seeing for the first time how essential teachers are. At the same time, we are also seeing how essential the parents to have them in our company for 8 hours a day. But now when they're going home, and before it was still a problem as well, but now when they're going home, now they're no longer going home. They're at school, they're at home, we're teaching from home, or there's this hybrid system that's working out. We're slowly trying to come to school. But in essence, what's happening is parents sort of picking up that responsibility of being teachers as well and being educators. And so rather than that stressful, we should look at it as my wife, I haven't asked her this question. Now that you're doing some teaching at home for our lovely children, how do you feel about teachers?
Well, I mean, seeing as how my husband's a teacher, I've always had mad respect for teachers, but it has increased for sure. And it has solidified to me the idea that I don't want to be a teacher. And I am so ready for my kids to go back to school.
So no, I'm happy to hear that. No, but really, the purpose of that question really for me was us to sort of recognize that a lot of parents are feeling this. This is a wonderful opportunity now for us to bring parents in and have this collaborative effort where we're both modeling together. And let's go into this now, because now we're sort of going to this idea of learning to walk, modeling with understanding. Now, this is the crux of the actual discussion today. Is everyone able to see my slides? Is it on the learning to walk slide?
No, it's your screen is frozen for some reason. Can you stop your share if you want? I can share the.
I'm gonna do that for a moment. Yeah, I'm gonna stop my share for 1
Even your
minute.
camera also is stuck, Sheikh Saad.
I think it's because
Oh, is it? Okay. So that's what I'm gonna do. If you just give me like half a minute, I'm just gonna log off and log back on, because I felt as soon as I finished sharing that I had lost all of you. So just give me 1 minute, inshallah. We're back. Okay, so it says here that you are sharing. Are you sharing?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, so we see your slide and we hear you.
I think because you're up there, the
Okay,
connection's
awesome.
not so good. So
Did
I
I
just
see
shared it.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Did you make any changes from here out?
I just made it larger in font. That was it.
Okay, that's fine then.
Okay, inshallah. And I don't have control. I'm joking. Just go ahead. Leave me alone over here. Unless you want to make me host again, then I can do this again.
Do you want me to stop sharing? Do you want me to stop sharing?
No, I just want you to go. Oh, okay, cool. So, sorry, we're on the previous slide when I had left off. So, okay, awesome. What happens when a child begins to walk? Well, actually, from a cognitive perspective, saying what happens when a child begins to walk? Like, what's happening developmentally over there?
They are going on to the next stage of development, which is, I mean, if you're asking cognitively, off the top of my head, I don't know, but we are talking about developing their brains, right? So everything they do is a new developmental milestone at that point, especially at that first year of life when they're learning so much.
Yeah, we have at the point a child begins to walk, it's really, when we're going back to this idea of mimicking and emulating, you have a child that has been watching their parents do something, but has been unable to achieve it, because just because the child's observing something doesn't mean that they're ready yet. My child observes me driving all the time. My children observe me driving all the time. They are not ready to get behind the wheel of a car. They can't. There is a certain point at which a person is able to now take the information and then subsequently put it into action. And the two cannot, it's very dangerous, even from a spiritual perspective, it's very dangerous for those two to always live disconnected. For example, Imam al-Ghazali, rahmatullahi alayhi, he mentioned in his Ayyuha al-Walad, he has this book that he wrote towards, it's not actually, it became a book, but he wrote back to one of his students who had asked him a series of questions. And in that text, in one of the letters that he wrote to his students, he mentioned, العمل بلا علم لا يكون العمل بلا علم لا يكون والعلم بلا عمل جنون. That action without knowledge, لا يكون, it can't exist. You have to have the knowledge to do the certain action that you're intending to do. So furthermore, when an individual is looking over here, this child has been watching the parents getting ready to walk. And now their body has caught up to them that they're able to take the information and put it into practice. So what do? We celebrate every moment. When the child begins to grasp onto the side of a table and stand up slightly and then fall over, we celebrate. That's their first attempt. It's a milestone. When they stand up and they're holding, but they haven't fallen, they haven't taken a step, we celebrate. That's a milestone. When they let go and then they're no longer holding on to something, but they're balancing and they didn't fall, that's a milestone. When they take that first step, that's a milestone. Now, along the way, there are a multitude of what's the word I'm looking for? Of failures, but we don't call them failures. When the child falls, and they may be some hard falls, they may, Allah protect, they might let go of the table and they hit their head on the side of the table. We don't say that's it, never again, and we tie them to the ground, they can't walk. We recognize that the bumps come along the way. When a person begins to walk, there will be a bunch of failures, but the positives overshadow the negatives, or overshadow the failures. So similarly over here, we title this walking the walk. We are now going to learn to walk as a community, and we're going to model as a community. And rather than focus on the failures, because if we're going to take this new step, there will be failures and there will be shortcomings. Rather than focus on the failures and the shortcomings that will come over the course of this year, where the hybrids might be put into place, or next year where we try to reintegrate the normalcy into our classrooms, we should highlight the successes, we should celebrate the successes, and we should see how we can grow on those successes. Want to add anything? We should move forward.
No, go ahead and move forward.
Okay, well, I can't because I don't have control of the screen.
Oh. Okay, so modeling.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so what is the idea of modeling is the idea of the observation and imitation that kids take on from us, which we've been talking about. And so everything that we do as parents and teachers and adults in the lives of children is a source or form of modeling. And in Islam, we talk about the Prophet ﷺ as the ultimate model for us, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that he is uswatun hasana, right? He is the best example. And so if we look at the Sunnah and the way that he lived his life and everything that encompasses the Sunnah, that is a type of modeling. And if we look at the way that we interact with our children as teachers or as parents, that is modeling as well. So children, as we've been saying, they're watching everything. They're watching everything we do. And that we have to be mindful that as parents at home, we're doing a type of modeling, and as teachers in the classroom, we're doing a type of modeling as well.
Yeah, and the verse that you mentioned, uswatun hasana, and we know uswatun hasana in the Quran. Allah Ta'ala speaks of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with this beautiful sifa, this description given to them. لقد كان لكم في رسول الله أسوة حسنة لمن كان يرجو الله واليوم الآخر وذكر الله كثيرا. Now, in this, if you look at the Mufassirun, they mention something very interesting about this. And they say that the verse itself could have been only I can't run the screen, sorry. The verse itself it could have been only لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ and stopped over there. But we see لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَ وَذَكْرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. Now, why do we have this latter part? Because not everyone will take the Prophet ﷺ as Uswatun Hasana. He will be a model for those who fit that frame. Remember, we spoke about framing earlier as well. So we have to understand that not all families will model, nor will they participate, nor be collaborative, and we cannot get frustrated with this. Because if Rasulullah ﷺ became frustrated with those individuals who did not take him as uswatun hasana, then the deen would never have spread. But the people like Abu Sufyan, who later becomes Muslim, radiallahu anhu, Hind, who later becomes Muslim, radiallahu anha, Khalid bin Walid, who later becomes Muslim, radiallahu anhu, eventually the modeling took place until they got to that point in their life where they were able to be amongst those who can take him as the best example. So you might have a second grader whose family will not listen or cooperate with you. But wait till 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Eventually you're modeling in the class, and the benefit that you bring by the tawfiq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow them to come into this. So we can't just assume this is going to be pie in the sky rhetoric where everything's ideal. Sometimes it takes a while. Not everyone will accept the modeling of someone else until they are ready. And once they're ready, then it becomes easy. And the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do we see? Like even hadith, we see it's the actions of the Prophet ﷺ and his statements, his tacit approvals, and his descriptions, his shama'il as well. It was constant modeling, but we have people who are from the how do you say this? The Orientalists. They don't take him as a role model. So our job is to model, to give the opportunity for people to model with us at home, but they may not be ready for it. And so we take the prophetic stance of hilm and sabr until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants that tawfiq. We are forbearing and we are patient until Allah opens that door. Okay, the next slide, please. Okay. So how can we work together? So I was asking my wife and I were talking about this, and this is the thing she mentioned yesterday was communication. So you can jump in on it right away, Sneha.
Yeah, so the idea is how can we as parents and teachers work together to model for our children? So the first thing is communication. Like as a parent, if I'm speaking as a parent, I want to know what's going on in the classroom so that I can help enforce that at home, or we can talk about it at home. So an example that we were talking about while preparing is the idea of maybe lessons around backbiting, right? So if this is being taught in their Islamic studies or Quran classes in school, then maybe if I know that, then maybe around the dinner table or when we're at home, then I can talk about this with my kids. So this communication back and forth between what's going on in the classroom can be helpful for me to, bring it together at home as well.
And communication is going to be essential because, and I'm telling you this as a teacher who struggles with communicating with parents. I do. That's one of my many, many flaws. I have an issue communicating with parents. But one of the benefits of communication is we can't expect parents to model examples, be model examples or model behavior at home if they don't know what they're supposed to model yet. And this is going to come up in one of the forthcoming slides. If parents are informed that in 2 weeks we're going to have a Hajj unit, okay, well, that's excellent. And they are often informed about this or of this, but you can't really model Hajj at home. Whereas if a child, for example, is going to cover backbiting or the sins of the tongue, and parents are informed in advance, that information at least puts it on the radar of the parents that we're going to cover this topic. And it's not enough just to inform them, and we're going to cover that as we move forward, but at least allows them to know that I need to be a little more careful at home. Because if my child's teacher is teaching the parent, is teaching my student, my child, to not backbite, and I'm backbiting in front of my child, then now I've caused a type of cognitive dissonance where there is this disconnect there. They have to either accept home as being correct or the school as being correct, but they can't accept both as being correct. And that's a struggle for children because they have to either say, you teachers to whom I look up to all of you, you are no longer at this level in my eyes. You have now fallen in my eyes because my parents are correct. Or vice versa. I accept you as being correct, but parents whom I have loved, adored, and looked up to for all these years, you have now fallen. And so the communication is the first step. What are the easiest steps of communication? So I'm going to teach you from my flaws over here. do not be content with one type of communication. I'm teaching myself today. This is like my promise today that I'm not going to do this anymore. If you only email, it's problematic. Now, people say, well, Prasad, how much do you expect us to do? Look, I don't expect much out of myself, so be better than me. But at the very least, if you can use multiple avenues, at least 2 avenues, maybe a small sheet that goes home to parents when they return back in person, and an email, because some parents, a lot of teachers, they say, well, I posted on my school webpage and the Google Classroom, and I sent an email. So really, in essence, what we're considering ourselves of having taking part in 3 methods of communication was only one method, because all 3 of those methods are electronic. And if the parent struggles with electronics at home, they haven't seen any of those methods because they're all in one method. Whereas if there is, maybe you post on your teacher page and you send home a note, then what that does is now the teacher who is unable to utilize electronics, maybe they're just not social media savvy, or they're not really good with electronics and technologically savvy, etc. They have another method in which communication can take place. That's the first one. Second one, provide projects and assignments that can engage families. Worksheets are not the end all. If I'm teaching imagine we have a sample worksheet. So look, not right. Okay, so sorry, I'm writing on the screen again. I realize you can't see it. So let's pretend we have a worksheet for backbiting. So the worksheet is a fill in the blank worksheet. There is a box of terminologies that are present. And so in this terminology box, this word box, you have the following. You have like major is one of the words. You have dead brother is another word, and you have some other words that are there. So the first sentence says backbiting is a blank sin. So yeah, you sit down with your child and help them find the word major, and then they write major, but that's still very theoretical. It's not practical. And how else can a family engage other than helping the child find the word? Or for example, there is a sentence that says backbiting. The Quran mentions backbiting is like eating the flesh of then there's a space, and you write dead brother. Okay, that's great, but that's not a practical way by which the family can engage in this particular action. But you might, for example, now think, okay, how can I engage the family such that they can model this behavior for my children? So you might send home a message to the parents that says that over the next weeks, we're covering the diseases of the heart related to the sins of the tongue. And the sins of the tongue we're going to focus on this year are backbiting, slandering, and telling tales. These are the 3. And then you let them know that. And now you have a project in the class. And the project in the class might be go home and interview your parents and ask them, when have they noticed people backbite the most, or slander or tell tales the most? So now the parent will sit down and be interviewed by the child, not about themselves. So it's not like exposing sins, but what they've noticed. And something along the line may include that question. They might respond by saying, I have noticed people engage in backbiting when they're on the cell phone too long. Now that opens up the conversation. That mom and dad might say, it's not wrong to use a cell phone, but if we're on it too long, then what might eventually happen is we might run out of things to say, and we might get into a sphere of backbiting. Or you might do something called the muraqaba dars. The muraqaba dars is this basic idea where you take a sheet of paper, and every night, and I do this with my high school students, when we cover when we in 10th grade, we memorize Surah Al-Hujurat together. When we reach those verses, they have this assignment. And every night they have to sit down, they have to reflect over all of the sins of the tongue throughout the day. Anytime they do it, they have to take out their steno pad, they have to write it down. At the end of the day, they have to see all the mistakes of the tongue that they've made. If it was against someone personally, they have to ask that person's forgiveness, and then they can do istighfar and cross it out. And the goal is at the end of every day, let's say there's 75 of them they wrote down. The next day you want to get to 73. The next day you want to get to 7. You want to slowly break it down. Well, this could become a family affair. It could be a family project. The family does this, and at the end of the night, they don't share the mistakes they made, but they share that, did I improve, or did I progress, or digress? It's like a whole motorcycle party over here. Sorry about that. One moment.
So just a time check. We have 5 minutes left. Is there going to be? Do you have more material to go through? Do we have time for discussion or questions?
We have about 3 more slides. So Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
probably
we'll have
let's,
3 more slides. So we'll try to race
yeah,
through
let's
it.
do, yeah, inshallah, run them quickly and then open the opportunity for some questions.
Inshallah. Create a culture and community of growth. This idea, basically, I'm going to start run through it now. Schools need to reach the families and create the environment of growth. And what we can set this with the fourth one as well, set goals and compassionately compete. This is the idea of ta'awun al-birri wa taqwa, to try to move and to do things together. So for example, you have school houses, right? We have like the house of Ansar and the house of Nujum. We have these houses very similar to like how Harry Potter works, where students compete in groups. Well, you can set families together to compete in groups as well. And it's basically thinking outside the box to be able to understand what the unit is that we are covering and try to subsequently push forward to do activities that will help make this an actual reality within our lives. Finally, provide meaning behind the action. It's very easy to tell parents we're going to talk about backbiting, etc. But unless we explain, families begin to understand. Sometimes parents don't know why is it important to model this behavior. So to have a virtual meeting with the parents or have a virtual class meeting or even an in-person meeting where we discuss that the reason why we're covering backbiting is from a social perspective, these ills cause ABC harm, and spiritually they cause XYZ harm as well. Sometimes when parents discover that, oh, these are the harms that come with it, they themselves will be very quick to also accept that reality and begin to model what they have as well. Sam, you want to add anything to it before we move on?
No, go ahead, move on.
No? Okay, cool. I'm just racing through it now. I can't move on. You have to move on for me.
No.
Okay, so extension modeling. Also within the school, we have, when we talk about parents modeling, students and parents are going to model when they see all teachers on the same page. So this can't only be an Islamic studies Quran concept. They can't be the righteous teachers of the school and everyone else is not on the same page. So we have to consider ways by which the schools can establish modeling opportunities for teachers so that when all teachers are on one page, it's easier to communicate this to parents as well. So cross-curricular work can be utilized, character programs that are specific for teachers. We have all these character value of the month, etc. for students, but the teacher should have their own framework that's established that they can also begin to better themselves. We have Spirit Week for like sports, just spirituality weeks, where that week, Mondays and Thursdays, we're fasting. Friday, we do an extra salawat on the Prophet ﷺ. Thursday, Wednesday, we give sadaqah. But there's a spirituality week where the whole school is moving forward. Now, if you're doing that in the school, you can very easily replicate that at home. Parents, Wednesday is sadaqah day for you. Choose the sadaqah of your choice and put that money aside for it, and have your child bring to a school which fund or organization you decide to donate to, etc. You have to mention how much you did. But it can now, when it extends, because in school it's only a subset of teachers. It has to become all teachers, and then it's easier to expand to the rest of the general community. Snag one more slide, please. I think it might be 2 more slides. Providing instruction. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. Don't be general. Be clear in guidelines, qualitatively, quantitatively, etc., on what we expect. If it's just general, then people will not know how to act. This include rubrics, etc. And then I think the last one is benefits, right? Mm-hmm. Next slide.
This is the next one.
Yeah, and benefits. There are benefits for this. Sorry? Okay, cool. I'm going to stop over here just because we're out of time, so we can just end over here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm sorry that we ran out of time, but we'd be able to knock it out.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Sana and Sheikh Saad for this beautiful presentation. Now we're going to have maybe 1 minute, maybe we'll have one question. Feel free to read through it, Sheikh Saad or Sister Sana, and answer it if you wish.
Yeah, so this question, what do you suggest about dealing with the mistakes I invariably make, short-tempered, etc.? This is actually something we wanted to cover. We just sort of ran out of time at the end. It is great to make mistakes, but we have to model owning up to our mistakes. I've gotten upset my children on multiple occasions. To go back and apologize to them will now be it's a teaching opportunity. And what the Islamic school system has to do is to show parents that every moment is a teaching opportunity. It's not only a parenting opportunity, it's a teaching opportunity. And so if I mess up, that's a teaching opportunity. The Prophet turning away from Abdullah bin Maktoum radiallahu anhu was a teaching opportunity. That what? You might be able to get away from something that the person who's being affected may not notice, because Abdullah bin Maktoum radiallahu anhu was blind. but Allah is always watching. So you want to always do things that are most preferable and pleasing to Allah, even if the person does not notice it. So if we make these mistakes, that's excellent. And I think it's part of the conversation the school should have with the parents on how we can recover from mistakes and try to take every moment to be a teaching opportunity.
Jazakallahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you both for this beautiful presentation. Feel free just to type in your emails, please, in the chat box based on one of the attendees' request. And that brings us to the end of this session. Inshallah, we're going to be meeting back into 1 hour, in 1 hour. And inshallah, it's going to be about the gender uniqueness and child development by Sheikh Muhammad al-Shinnawi. Another important presentation that we request all of you, inshallah, to come back and make time for. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu fikum. And see you shortly. Assalamu alaikum.